These are problems similar to tonight's homework, and again, it's another review day on factoring trinomials. Now, notice that when we're factoring these trinomials, we are looking at two different signs. And so let's take a look at the two different types of trinomials we'll be looking to factor. One of them looks like this. It's a x squared plus or minus a bx, and b could be any number, and then we have a plus c. And so whenever this term is positive, that tells us that we are going to add the outer and inner terms. We are going to end up adding because we have the same sign. So that's a big concept that I've talked about in the past. So whenever we have the same sign, we end up having to add the outside terms, the inside terms, to make this b term. Well, the other type looks like this. It's if we have same thing, an x squared. It could be a plus or minus bx term, so b could be any number. But when it's a minus c term, when the constant is negative, that means we have opposite signs. And when we have opposite signs, we're going to end up subtracting. So we're going to end up subtracting those outside and inside terms. And again, on the same sign, let's go ahead and didn't write it down here, but here we will add the outside inside terms. So let's take a look at a couple examples of each of the types and see what we have. So here we have x squared minus 7x plus 6. So we look at this sign right here, and again, this tells us that we have the same sign. So what do they end up adding to make? The outside and inside terms are going to end up adding to make this number right here, this negative 7. Since they add to make a negative, that tells us that our two terms are going to be both negative inside the two binomials. So when I draw my two sets of parentheses to make my binomials, I'm going to start with my first terms, x and x multiplied to make that x squared. And again, since they're the same sign, I know they both are negative because they add to make a negative. So all I need to do is get these last terms here, those last terms, to multiply to make 6. But I need them to add together because they're the same sign, and when I add them, they'll end up making a negative 7x. So when I try some numbers, again, if you try something and it doesn't work, go ahead and keep it there and just cross it off. Maybe put if you try like a 2 and a 3 and you think, okay, yeah, those make 6 when I multiply them, but when I try to add these numbers up, you see how negative 2x, negative 3x, that makes 5, not 7. So you know that's wrong. So once you've tried something and it doesn't work, it's okay. Just go ahead and make sure you write down what you've tried, because as the problems get harder, you're going to want to keep track of the things that you've tried so you don't try them again. So I know I tried 2 times 3, and that didn't end up working, so I'll cross that off and try something else. Other numbers that make 6. Well, 6 and 1. And so when we check those, the inside make a negative 6x. The outside make a negative 1x, and that does add to make negative 7x, so it does work out. So x minus 6 times by x minus 1. Well, I get some people asking, well, can I have it the other way? Can I have x1 first? Sure you can. And rewrite it that way. Again, it's x minus 1 multiplied by x minus 6. So either way would mean the same exact answer. So just put an or there between them. Again, the reason why you can do that is you can use the commutative property. Well, let's take a look at the next one. Here, we don't have that positive sign next to the c term. So let's take a look at what we do have, though. We have a minus sign. So this term, again, right there tells us that we have opposite signs. So opposite signs mean that we're going to end up subtracting the outside and inside terms to make a negative 4. So as I draw my two sets of parentheses, start with the x and x, and as I do this, I'm thinking of numbers in which when I multiply them and then combine them, they will subtract to make 4. So numbers that come to my mind are 9 and 5. Those multiplied to make 45. Well, let's check the outside and inside terms. This makes 9x. This makes 5x. And when I go ahead and combine them, remember you're subtracting, we can get a negative 4x. Now, how do I get negative? Well, it's when you put the correct sign in front of the right term. See, I need more negatives than positives. So I'm going to make the 5x positive, the 9x negative, and that will end up making that negative 4x. So there it is, x minus 9 times by an x plus 5. Well, Well, taking a look at the next one again, you look at that last digit sign. It's what tells you what to do. So it tells us that we need to add the two signs because we have the same sign. Well, let's figure out what kind of sign we have. Well, let's go back over here, and since they need to add to make a positive 10, that tells us that we're going to have two positive signs. So we're going to end up with x, and you can already put in the plus and the plus. So now let's figure out what numbers multiply to make that 24. We've got lots of different numbers, but we want to find the ones that add to make 10. Well, the ones that do add to make 10 are 6 and 4. Again, if you didn't get that right away, just keep on trying until you get the ones that do work out. And so we go ahead and check these just to make sure. Inner terms make 6x, outers make 4x. Yep, those do add to make 10x, so it does end up working. And I have my signs right in all. So x plus 6 times by an x plus 4. Well, let's take a look at the next one here. We've got, this time, an opposite sign. So again, you're going to have different ones each time. Always look at that last digit sign. So that's the main thing I want you to notice, is that last digit sign tells you what we should do with the outside and inside terms. It tells us that we need to subtract those inside and outside terms. So you don't know where the sign goes yet. So a lot of people want to put a plus and a minus. Don't do that yet, because you might get their number in the wrong spot. Just try to get them to subtract to make 6 first. So let's try a 9 and a 3. See, when I go ahead and check the outside and inside terms, I end up with a 9x minus 3x, and I can get a 6x. Now is when I figure out the sign, because I want a positive 6x. So that means I need to have more positives than negatives. So it's the x times by 3, which needs to be negative. So I'll put the negative sign there. And the 9 and x need to be positive. So I'll put the positive sign here to get a positive 6x. So x plus 9 times by an x minus 3. Well, taking a look at the next one, again, that minus sign right there tells us that we have to subtract. And this is real important, especially with this problem here. So we have opposite signs, so that tells us that the outer and inner need to subtract to make 6. Well, there's only one option to multiply to make 5. So it tells me I don't know where the sign goes. They need to be opposite signs. See, when I have opposite signs, they have to subtract. See, I need 5x and 1x to subtract to make a bigger number than what I have as the biggest number there, to make 6x, and I cannot do that. See, because of this sign, it tells me that I have to have opposite signs. But in order for this to work, I'd have to have the same sign to multiply to make to add to make that negative 6x. But they can't be the same sign. Notice how these have to be opposite signs. So one of those has to be a positive in order to make this a negative, but then once I do that, they won't add to make 6. So this one, you can't factor. And you've got one problem on the homework tonight that is similar to that, where you're going to go ahead and try it, but it looks like it's going to work, but because of a sign, you won't be able to factor it. And so you do have one question that has that as an answer. Let's take a look at the next one here. Here, again, we look at this sign first. This tells us that we do have the same sign. So unlike the last one, they will add to make 5. So let's go ahead and try it. We know we have x for the first term, x for the second one here. Since they multiply to make a positive 4, but they add to make a negative, the same sign needs to be negative. Now what numbers multiply to make 4? Well, 2 and 2 do, but those only add to make 4. So let's get them to add to make one number higher. That means you need to go with numbers that are further apart, and that would be 1 and 4. So you see how this makes a negative 4x? This makes a negative 1x, the outside terms do, and those two do add to make that negative 5x. So it does end up working out. So in order to get these right, you've really got to check those outside and inside terms to see if you have the right number. And the nice thing about these problems is that you always know you've done them right, because in order to do them, you have to check your answer as you go. Well, those are the problems you'll end up seeing on tonight's homework. Good luck.